Welcome back to MyFinJourney. Today's guest is Jennifer Javornik, a leader at Filament Games, where she helps organizations harness one of the most powerful and misunderstood forces of human behavior, play. Most people think of games as entertainment. Jennifer and her team use games to drive real-world outcomes, helping people learn new skills, change behaviors, solve problems, and even shift the way they think. Through partnerships with organizations like Roblox, Amazon, Meta, Unity, BrainPop, iCivics, and the Smithsonian, Jennifer has helped build experiences that sit at the intersection of education, technology, psychology, and human engagement. She also played a major role in growing the gaming industry itself as a founding member and board leader of the Wisconsin Games Alliance, helping attract investments, talent, and innovation to the region. For the MyFinJourney audience, this episode is about something much bigger than gaming. It's about how people learn, how habits are formed, how communities are built, and why engagement is one of the most valuable currencies in the business world. Jennifer, welcome to MyFinJourney.
Well, thank you so much. What an introduction. I love it. I want to talk about all those things.
Let's do it. Where do you want to start?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I like what you said about games for sure, especially because, you have an adult audience. I think the one thing that adults misunderstand, and especially when they're thinking about, games in like the workforce is like, oh, that might be good for my Gen Z employees, or they think it's actually, just appropriate for youth. Where if you really look at the data from the Entertainment Software Association, the median age of a gamer is something like 38. So I think the reason why we love games is because they're super engaging and they provide a challenge. So I think you can think of Filament Games as any other video game studios. We make games that are super engaging, that are motivating to play, that scale you through levels of difficulty. We make games you don't want to put down. I think the difference is that in a regular game, you learn a lot. You learn how to play the game, you learn different strategies. But the difference in what we do is that we want you to have been changed as a human being and take something new in the world. So for a lot of people, we design games so that you came in not knowing something and now you know it, you gain knowledge. But it can also be we helped you through a mindset shift, or we help you through a behavior change, or we activated you to do something in the real world. So yeah, I think the idea of games, it's really the structure, the scaffolding, the challenge, the strategy. That's what games are. And they're fun to play, but it's great for learning.
Jennifer, everything that you said sounded so good. And I'm
Yeah.
probably a gamer, right? So I have my bias. I'm very pro games.
Okay.
But I feel like there's a mentality as a parent today in 2026 that gaming is bad. Meanwhile, as a child who is now a parent who grew up in the 90s, there was never a conversation about gaming being bad per se. I don't think there was a conversation about too much TV, too many games, or anything like that. Those conversations exist today. But everything that you described was very positive in how games can help people learn and grow, which is all MyFinJourney is about, learning and growing, getting 1%
Yep.
better. But it feels like there might be a gap. And there might be a gap that you and I could easily not talk about, maybe because of our perceived bias. And I want to start the conversation there to talk about that gap,
Sure.
that parent, my wife, whomever that parent is, that's maybe anti-gaming or thinks that there should be a very strict limitation on games. Is it that we're playing the wrong types of games in those situations? Because you talked about engagement of games. You didn't say the word like addiction, but there is gaming addiction is now a serious problem and maybe even
Mhm.
viewed as an epidemic in the world. So I wanted to, if you don't mind, I wanted to touch on that with the intention that we can all learn and grow, and maybe there is a difference between different types of games. Maybe there are good habits versus bad habits. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. And feel free to break it down by gender. If one gender is, playing games too much, you already gave us statistics on age, which I thought was very interesting. So, the floor is yours. I'm curious to understand how you look at this.
Okay, you asked me a lot of things. Let me break down. First, the easy
Sure.
part. You can all go to the Entertainment Software Association website. Once a year, they publish like a status of the game industry. And I'm pretty sure year after year, the gender breakdown of women versus male gamers is pretty equal.
Why do you think that society views gamers as typically, young kids, young men, like
We tend
Fortnite?
to include the players who play Wordle every day or play like a match 3 game on their phone. I mean, the mobile games market should not be scoffed at. Like, it is a very strong market. And I think that's partly is because women are multitaskers. Last time I had like a 10-hour free block to do anything. Couple things. I think, first of all, if you compare it to when we were young, I mean, I can't quote you the exact number, but there's so many more games available than there ever was. The other thing is the reality is we grew up, we had more mobility freedom. We were kind of allowed to run around town. I mean, I'm making assumptions about how old you are, but like we had more
I agree
ability
with
to
these
take
assumptions. Yeah.
ourselves wherever we wanted to go. Whereas in this day and age, generally most kids don't have that experience. They have to wait for their
Why is
parents
that?
to take them somewhere.
Why do you think that is? As a parent, I don't know, are you a parent? Sorry.
I am a parent. My kids are
So,
older
so,
now, though. They're 18 and
okay.
21. I think
As a
partly
parent
it's
who,
like
uh-huh.
we worry about traffic. I think there's more knowledge about like safety. I think there's just a feeling like, we used to just like knock on our friends' doors to play. And now you kind of set up a play date is kind of how I think most of America operates. So number one, I hate to say it, but I think kids are just stuck at home more. Unless they're being driven to soccer practice or on a play date, they have a lot more unstructured time in their home. So that's number one. I think number two, there's a lot more games and the games have gotten better at grabbing your attention. I think parents do need to know what games their kids are playing because there are games that are designed to just keep your kids' attention as long as possible. They use things like loot boxes or gambling mechanics to like essentially keep your kid hooked into the game. There's also games with really long, like pay to play games where if you're not going to spend money on the game, they're going to make you grind for a really long time. And these kids who are at home are willing to do the grind, which is why they're investing so much time into the game. I think it's funny when I talk to parents when they're like, oh, I only let my kid play free games. And I think like, well, for probably a couple dollars, you could like reduce the time that they have to grind on something like a lot and let them actually get to the gameplay. So I think there's that. I think also games are just, we've had now, it was different. When I grew up, games were like a newer industry. Now we've been making games for decades. We've just gotten better at making them so good that people don't want to put them down. I had restrictions in my house on games as much as I think well-designed games are good use of your entertainment time. I don't know. I'm a structured person. So it's like not 24 hours a day did my kids have entertainment time. Like they had to do, they played sports and I made sure they had a lot of friends to play with and, they had some chores around the house. So, I think when parents complain about gaming, it's that they feel like they can't get their kids to put the device down to do other things. And my recommendation is always your first strategy should be instead of going to like enforcement and strict limiting, find things that they're tangentially related to the game they're playing that might entice them to step away from their game. So if your kid loves fighting game, put them into fencing. If you wish you could play more like family board games, find board games that are the same like subject matter as the video games that they're playing. Lean in, take an interest in the game they're playing, like sit down next to them and watch them play, ask them about their strategy, see if they'll give you the phone for a few minutes and, try to play yourself a bit. Like instead of attacking it immediately as the enemy, try to lean in and then try to see I think you'll learn a lot about your kid, what they're interested in, how their brains work. And maybe you can find some like activities or interests that are related to what they're interested in kind of in the real world.
I think this was a really powerful response, Jennifer. And I really want to say thank you for providing it. But before I explain why it was so powerful, I want to understand from your perspective as a parent with older kids, did you see a lot of parents doing this with their kids when their kids were 12, 9, 15? Like in that period where like, kids grow up, they go through a lot of changes, etc. Did you see a lot of parents who were able to really bridge that gap? Or was it more like, hey, like they had this phone and their phone is going to kind of help them, and I'm just going to focus on my work and I'm going to focus on my life. Like, what were you noticing?
Mix. I definitely had the
Okay.
parents are like, oh, I hate it. I just want to take it away from them. To like parents who learned to play Fortnite and they put it on the family TV so they could all play together. I mean, it's a mix. I think video games are like if you can relate to it as a parent, like video games are really it's similar to the enjoyment you get out of a board game, except the video game enforces the rule. You don't have to read like a 14-page pamphlet to enforce the rules. So think of why you
You
like
can't
board
cheat
games.
as efficiently.
Yeah, yeah. Think about why you like board games because they're competitive, they're interesting, they're a challenge, they involve strategy. I always say video games are better use of your teen's time than social media. Social media is so passive, and you don't, as you flip through your reels, you don't even get to control the content that's being fed to you. So, especially to me, when I think of like a teen flipping through reels, like who knows what they're going to be served, what trash they're going to be served. Now I'm going to have the social media people coming after me.
No,
But
this
at least
post
with
on like
video
LinkedIn.
games, okay, good. At least video games are like a well structured, usually some kind of adventure that is like well designed and well executed. It's a game world that it's active. It's not passive like social media.
I really loved the social media parallel. I think it kind of opened a door that I didn't necessarily think of, because it's one of those things that kids today, people in general, all of us, we have so many options when it comes to technology, when it comes to platforms, when it comes to like how we're going to spend our time. And sometimes it feels like games are vilified more than the aimless scrolling on Instagram, TikTok, etc. So I think this has been very interesting, conversation, Jennifer. I wanted to pivot a little bit, and I wanted to really dive deeper when you said, games are educational. When you talked about like the value that it can provide to people, I know you talked about it from a family structure perspective. I wanted to understand from an individual, person, right? If it's that 39-year-old that you alluded to, or if it's that, 9-year-old that I alluded to, what do you think the educational value of games are? What do you think, games are that you've worked on personally that you think provide an immense amount of value from an education perspective and a growth perspective?
Sure. So I first want to say that essentially this is radical, but nearly all video games, you're going to learn something because you have to learn how to play the game. You have to learn the strategy of the game. You have to learn the rules of the game. You're learning. It's not like you started and you knew everything. So um, there's a lot of research on commercial entertainment gains and the value not only of like critical thinking, strategy, and stuff like that, but also people who play these massive guild based games that it gives people the opportunity to develop like social and leadership skills as they kind of organize to go defeat the monster. Um, there are games that are made specifically for learning, and those are the types of games that Filament's made, which is, like I said before, they're like games, but we want you to know something that you bring into the real world. Probably some of the ones, probably the when people think of like what the original educational game is, a lot of people think of Oregon Trail, which is something that I played back
It's a
in the day.
classic.
Classic games like Carmen San Diego, super popular. There's been a lot of iterations. I think when I look back at our catalog, we've worked on over 400 projects over the last 20 years. So there've been a lot. But some of my favorites are we made a couple of years ago, we worked on a project where it was a research project with a couple of universities. It was led, I think, by Columbia's Teachers College in partnership with the University of Wisconsin. I'm sorry, I think there were some other universities, but they had applied to the grant that was focused on like how do we get more urban youth interested in careers in big data, like data analytics. And they had proposed that their strategy in the grant was to make a game to expose, and their test bed, the partner for testing, were New York public schools. So we worked with that team to create a really fun game called Beats Empire. You can actually, I just noticed they still have the game up for research purposes. It's the URL is play.beatsempire.org. And in this game, it's a tycoon style game where you start with nothing and you build a music studio over time. where you recruit different musical acts that come to your studio. You pick and you kind of hire songwriters to write specific songs for these artists. You make decisions about how and when to release the songs demographically. So we had a fictional map of a fictional New York City, and different boroughs had different inclinations about what they wanted and what they liked. And at the back of this is to really succeed at the game, there was a whole back end to your music studio that was a data and analytics dashboard. So you could look at marketing trends. You could look at public opinion. You could, analyze news feeds to see which artists were getting recognition in the media. And essentially you could, make strategic decisions based on the data you were seeing. I love that game because it plays like many of the tycoon games that I've played in my past. And yet it was, as a smarty pants, it was really nice to be able to actually go into the data and make really informed decisions on where I was spending my marketing dollars, where I was releasing music. It just felt deeper and cooler than some of the regular tycoon games where you're just clicking randomly and things grow. So I really love that one. That's definitely a type of client that we work with a lot, university researchers who apply to grants to solve problems in education. And when the research team thinks that a game-based intervention would be a great solution, that's when we end up getting pulled into the grant.
I'm thinking Lemonade Tycoon.
Yeah.
I'm not even thinking that Tycoon Games is its own category.
Dash is essentially, it's a resource management game, but it's a tycoon game.
Yeah. And it's as an adult, I don't think of that gaming era as me learning skills and growing and anything like that. It was just, I just played games and it was what it was. But from your perspective, it sounds like there's a whole positive psychology behind how these games help upskill people. So from your perspective, how do these games help form, habits, positive or negative?
What's really cool about games is a well-designed game is based on a learning theory. One of the learning theories that they're built on is this idea of the zone of proximal development. So there is a zone where in learning that a learner will learn the best and feel the most motivated to learn. And the idea is that if something is way too easy, it falls below the lower line of that zone. If it's too easy, people lose interest really quickly and kind of move on or tune out or anything like that. Same thing with that zone. If it's way too hard for where they are, depending on who you are, if you have a lot of grit, you might chip at it for a while. But eventually, most people, if the content is at the higher than that upper line, they will also abandon because it's just not accessible for their current degree of knowledge. So ideally, any learner in any medium, you're kind of staying in that zone of proximal development. Well, what's great about games is we can design games to keep you in that zone, because a lot of time in games, we're feeding out the next feature, the next challenge, the next thing. And a lot of times, if you see a well-designed game, you'll see the first time you do something in the game, it's super easy. You're going to get it right and the game applauds. And the next time you're asked to do something a little bit more difficult, but then the game rewards you. And then it can kind of slowly over time build up where you're managing really complex systems. Show people how you could break down complicated things into smaller tasks. If you really think at the height of your gaming, whatever game that you were playing, how many things you had to know to do well at that game is probably pretty incredible. And the way you got there was, first of all, the game was probably well designed to kind of take you through it gradually. But then you kind of put in the hours, trying, experimenting, failing, trying new strategies, failing, winning. It's kind of this, games are like a bastion of trial and error. And as humans, we love it because most of us want to get right into the action and poke around and see what it's like. The classic is you get a piece of furniture from IKEA. The classic joke is that no one wants to read the directions. I think games today are the same way. They just want to jump in and try it. And it's actually what the research shows is that action of fumbling, trying, losing, getting it right, exploring the edges, doing it wrong on purpose to see what's going to happen. That is what cements these concepts into your brain, not only for deep understanding, but actually gives you like long-term retention of, whatever concept you were experimenting with.
Jennifer, I think this has been very profound. And, for the listener, maybe for you as well, a lot of these concepts are also talked about in a book, Atomic Habits, to say sometimes people want a very big outcome and it's unachievable, so they give up. And really, it's to say, hey, you take that big outcome and you break it down into small, actionable steps that you can take today to ultimately get to that big outcome. But I haven't heard anyone ever talk about games like this. So that's why I want to once again thank you, Jennifer, not only for taking out the time to have this conversation, but for the clarity in which you're speaking, because you're taking something that I'm sure is very technical. And I do find, I do think that you've broken it down very well, but I don't think people think about games this way to say, hey, everybody wants to have, children that are resilient, children that want to overcome challenges, children that want to view the world as their oyster and view that they can do anything. And that's fundamentally what it sounds like games do. But we as society don't really always recognize that place and that value of a game as, hey, this teaches you to take a very huge outcome and break it into small actionable steps that you can do today to then be a grandmaster at this game. And for the child, for the individual, for that 39-year-old adult, it might be that the goal is to be the master of the game. But the reality is like life is a game, right? Like your financial stability is a game. It's a journey. And you need to learn those small steps along the way to be able to master that game. But I guess for you, Jennifer, right, what got you into the gaming industry? What got you into and really passionate about the things that you do today?
I stumbled into the industry, but once I did, I realized it was a great fit because before I've been with Filament now for 12 years. And before that, I was for 18 years in the like very traditional IT consulting world. And I was doing really big, hard projects, ERP implementations, statewide tax systems, nothing fun, nothing easy, big dollar about high risk, hard work. But my undergrad was in theater, and to complement this really hard conservative job, for 15 years, I was an improv comedian. So I've always been someone who's very creative, really into storytelling. There's never been an arts and craft project I didn't like. So once I got into video games, I realized why it was such a good fit, because I think video games are the only medium I can think of. Well, maybe movies too. Okay, fine, movies. But video games are one of the few areas that combine creativity with technology. So if you are someone, I definitely started as a software engineer. I have a very structured brain. I was a project manager for big IT projects. I like structure and process, but I'm also really creative. And I think video games are like the perfect marriage of those two seemingly very different parts of someone like me, but actually they fit so nicely in a video game.
I love that explanation. And Jennifer, earlier on, you talked about video games. You talked about the idea of forming a team. You talked about the idea of somebody being a leader. It almost felt like video games are a sport. Today, there are esports and video games are a sport and all of that. I'm not going to touch on the controversy there. But what I wanted to understand from your perspective is, how do video games end up creating a sense of community?
Okay, well, that's really interesting. There's two ways. Well, there's a few ways that video games create community. And before I move forward any further, I just want to clarify something. Educational games like our company makes, we make them, we push so hard so that those skills are transferable. What I'm saying is if you're playing one of these huge MMO games and you're part of a guild, like, do people know what a guild is? It's like a group of people offline kind of find each other on Discord, which is like a messaging system like Slack.
Think of
And it's kind
Pokemon
of like,
Go. When you downloaded
yeah,
Pokemon
Pokemon
Go and
Go
people
was
were
great.
traveling the world and meeting up to
Yes,
catch Pokemon,
I don't
that's a
know.
guild.
Yeah, I got wrapped into a guild when I played King Shot for a while. I can't believe it. But you kind of, the game gets to a point where if you want to defeat like the biggest monster or the biggest dragon or the biggest boss, you just can't do it as a single player. So usually then you kind of go to some boards, you start reading about like, how could I do it? And then you quickly realize you kind of have to join a group. And then that group sets like a time in the real world. And, a lot of times these groups are people are from all around the world or all over the country. So it's a whole process just to get a time that we can all go in. We all agree on a strategy. Like, if we're going to use some of our weapons that are like high cost, hard to get, when are we going to use them in this fight? So there's a lot of like planning and strategy. So that's like a very clean way about how it builds community. You're really chatting with real people in the real world about what you're going to go do in this game. I think there's other ways though. A lot of the games that I've played over the years have just offline communities for people. I've played a lot of creative games. There was a time where I loved a fashion game. So I would spend time on like community boards where people were talking about like their strategy to win a certain challenge. People were really proud of like particular outfits they were putting together and they post them. Like it's actually just like any other discussion boards, but you'll see a lot of time for games. There's places where people go to kind of just discuss the game. A lot of studios like ours, we'll run our own discussion boards. So then we'll pop on and tell them about, hey, there's a couple things we're thinking about. What feature would you like better? Or, hey, I'm going to give you a sneak peek to like something that's coming down the road. So I think there's a great way to build community that way, even if it's a single player game, like a game where there's not other people. And then, I think you just mentioned it. There's just a growing number of formal and informal video game tournaments, esports events where people are literally leaving their homes and going to either watch other people who are really at their top skill play these games, or they just go play the games themselves in kind of mini tournaments at your local establishment. So I think, there's lots of ways that people come together about games. I think games are just like your favorite band, your favorite TV show, your favorite movie. Like communities gather around things they love. And there's certainly communities that gather around like the most beloved games that people play. And then I'm ignoring the whole like content creator ecosystem that like content creators who love the game, they make their own communities where they're publishing content of them playing the game. But then people who follow them, get to know each other and they start, joining each other together to watch the live stream of someone playing. And then they can, they get to know each other on the chat. There's a lot of community building.
I think quite simply, Jennifer, the world of gaming is so much bigger than people realize. And I would say that that's true of many industries, right? Like when we're talking about community building, we went from the individual teaming up with other players to beat a big boss. Like I view myself as a gamer in theory. I've never played any games where I had to do that, or I've never gotten to the point in the game where I had to do that, right? And those are two different things. To the other spectrum, which is the guy who's created a whole business around his gaming and is now monetizing off of the game. And I do want to talk about monetization. I want to understand those things from your perspective. But before I do that, I want to really understand what engagement looks like from your perspective with respect to games over the past 12 years, over your career. Have you seen engagement increase? Have you seen retention increase? Have you seen, maybe dark psychology or different, strategies to keep people addicted or enticed with games? Help me unpack this aspect of the conversation.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert, but I can definitely tell you what I've observed. I think what's happened over the last 12 years, there's in kind of the like tween market, like 8 to 14, 15, 16. There's just been 3 dominant games that have emerged, which are Minecraft, Fortnite, and
Among Us or
Roblox.
no?
Roblox.
Okay.
But I'll
Okay.
actually say Roblox is just a platform. Actually, Roblox is somewhere where there's lots of games. So within Roblox, there's a couple of games that are super popular, but we're just going to call it Roblox. And that's happened for a couple of reasons that I'm not going to go into. I think the major one is that what's happened is like individual kids start identifying as I'm a Minecraft player, I'm a Fortnite player. Usually these kids like just get into a game because their friends get them into this game and they want to play with their friends. So in a way, it's like naturally emerging. And then, if you're going to commit to a game like Fortnite or in Roblox, like there's less of a like, oh, I like to play a lot of different games to like try a lot of different things. And there's more like my whole identity is Fortnite. I'm going to wear
Wow.
Fortnite clothes. I'm going to like be on chat rooms with Fortnite. I'm going to play Fortnite. Like that is now my identity. Things could change again. I'm not sure it's going to be like this forever, but that's definitely what we see. And those are some really amazing games that have really incredible longevity. So we've got to give props to all those games. Unfortunately, though, it's made it really hard for super creative indie teams who want to do like produce new content for that age group. It's hard to get them away from what they love. Luckily, though, at least Fortnite, I'm not sure about Minecraft, but I know Fortnite and Roblox allows like have platforms for like individuals to be creators within the platform. So even though if your kid's like a Fortnite player, there's actually like hundreds of games within the Fortnite player because they now allow the user community to make games within it. Same thing like Roblox. There's thousands of games they can play within Roblox.
It's so interesting, Jennifer, and I want to understand maybe at a deeper level. I felt like when I was growing up, there was like RuneScape, there was like Pokemon, there was maybe Yu-Gi-Oh, there was like FIFA, NBA, like there was all these maybe Call of Duty. But what you're saying kind of suggests that there's like a top three
For that
versus
younger
maybe
demographic,
for
because we
that
make
younger.
educational games, I'm always
Hmm.
thinking about that demographic.
Okay.
I can't rattle. I know Call of Duty has been the top game in the world financially for like the past 7, 8, 10 years. I'm not sure, but I can't really spout out those statistics very
Okay.
well.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It's very interesting. And then ultimately it leads us to that question, that conversation about like skill building,
Hmm.
about, building financial literacy, about monetizing. You talked about these content creators and how they're able to monetize and how they're able to create their own communities. And some of these guys, start quite young, let's say 8, let's say 12. From your perspective, right, and feel free to like own your bias or your knowledge on the topic or lack thereof. Why do you think they make that transition from like having that smaller community of their friends to going on and streaming and becoming maybe a content creator? What is the thought process? Is it that they've mastered one skill and they're talent stacking? Is it just, they're following the norms of society? Like help me understand maybe what's going on there.
Well, it's interesting because we do work in like workforce development. And I remember in the past, like 3 months, we were talking to a potential client who specializes in workforce development. And they were like, oh, there's just a massive survey that came out. Do you know what the number one career kids say they want to be when they grow up? And I'm like, what, doctor?
Content creator.
Content creator. And it blows it away. Like the number two, which I forget what it is, isn't even close.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
first of all, you need to know that it's not like a couple of kids with crazy ideas. Like, I think this has the content creator landscape because we hear the stories of the big, mega successful content creators that are so compelling that, like, and it just seems easy. You just turn on a camera and you start recording. I think a lot of people think, like, this is the way not only I want to spend my time, but this is going to be my career. And I think people stay in it because, yeah, there's those huge accounts that do very well. But even as a micro influencer, you could do more better than working at the Quick Trip. Like you could make a good amount of money as a teenager doing it. So I think it's the reason why everyone in my generation wanted to be a movie star. I think part of it is you see it as like, hey, this would be a very enjoyable, fun way to like make a career.
Yeah. I think it's very,
And it seems
very
like all you
interesting.
need is your phone. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like I get to hang out with my friends or I get to play the game I love. Like, I think there's so little barriers to entry and it just seems very doable. And I think even the micro influencers, make non-zero amount of money that it's like motivating to keep going.
From your perspective, Jennifer, do you feel like the gaming industry is saturated? Do you feel like it's still growing? Help us understand maybe what the next 12 years could look like.
Oof, I'm not the right person for that, but I can tell you what's happened in the last few years. I think
Sure.
when in 2020, when the shutdown happened with COVID-19, the game industry went through an expansion like I had not seen in the 10 years before that. I think everyone was at home, everyone was playing a ton of games, everyone probably was very anxious and like spending money in games, there was a lot of investment in games in the game industry. I think for the first time, game studios traditionally had been very, um, just as an industry, a lot of them are very like, we don't support work from home. So getting a game in the industry meant you had to be in the city where the studio was. But suddenly during COVID-19, you could live everywhere. A lot of studios said, hey, when this is done, you'll have to come, and move here. But I think a lot of people placed bets. So a lot of people were like switching jobs. A lot of new investments happened. A lot of big projects got kicked off. And it was like a golden era. But I think what happened is that, like, as the games that were funded, right, a lot of these huge commercial games, they get launched kind of at the end of COVID, right? It takes like usually a year or 2 years, sometimes longer to build like one of these massive games. And suddenly, the games get released. They don't meet expectations. People are going back to work. Like people are not, people are going back to school. They no longer have like Zoom school where they'd be playing games on the side and watching school. So I think follow this big period of expansion. We've had a big period of
Contraction.
contraction. I mean, you read there was a lot of consolidation in the industry. So big players like Microsoft started buying like other big studios. So we went through a first wave of contraction with kind of post-COVID not meeting expectations because the world went back to our lives. But now this year we're going through a second wave of contraction just because, a year ago, the AI tools couldn't really help that much with video game development. But now there's a lot of tools you can do to enable very quick, very high quality video games. And I think just in every other tech industry, a lot of entry level jobs are being cut. And mid-level career people are being asked to do more with AI. And this is how we'll keep going. So I think the video game is still huge, the video game industry. It's bigger than the movie and TV industry combined. So, but kind of on the ground, we've been going through like years now of massive layoffs as the industry tries to right size.
It's very interesting. I feel like you put a lot of things in perspective today for us, Jennifer. I really, really do appreciate the entire conversation, the depth which you've gone through, the clarity. Now, if somebody's listening to this conversation and if they want to learn more about your firm, if they want to learn more about you, they want to learn more about, potential opportunities in the industry, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, just go to our website, filamentgames.com, and there's a contact us form that goes right to my inbox. So, yeah, if you have an idea, if whether you're in corporate training or you have a great educational game idea for youth, or your interest is patient education or digital health or anything where you think, or you're interested in, we also do VR, augmented reality development. If any of those you've ever been curious about and you've been wanting someone to walk you through how you could even do that, I'd be happy to talk to you and walk you through the process and show you more how we'd work together.
Awesome. Jennifer, what we'll do is we'll include all those links in the show notes, and we'll even include the link for the game that you mentioned earlier in the conversation.
Great.
Once again, I want to thank you for your time, and we'll speak more soon.
Thanks
Have
for
a good
having
one,
me.
guys. Bye.